spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo.
I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam Diaz.
What up?
And we're here to start the year. I mean, we've already had an episode to start the year.
Are we though?
But I think this is my first topic of the year, because the first topic was squishy, and this one's gonna be not so squishy. So
What the? Okay, I'm very confused because I'm sitting here trying to remember what we covered last week. It is so bad not remembering.
My first topic of the year, I think, was the objects on eBay. So it wasn't
haunted objects on eBay.
It was more of, the ish of Scaryish. And then this week, I'm going to do the scary part of Scaryish.
And mine was prophecies. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Now I remember. Right on. Yeah, I'm going to do something that's kind of scary, more rooted in just actual fact. So I guess you're doing ish and I'm doing scary this week. So that's cool. Before we get going, I think we wanted to do some shout outs to 3 of our patrons. So shout out to Shandon, Ethan, and Carl Olav.
Thank you guys for being amazing supporters on
Absolutely.
Patreon. Not that anybody else isn't, but they're super supporters.
They're super supporters, meaning they are at the level of the shout out tier and above, so that we let them know every month how much their support means to us by reading their name off in an episode in that month. Because sincerely, we have said these names so many times, and I honestly don't know if we would be able to keep going without the support we have from our patrons and our listeners. But it's really nice to be able to highlight these 3 folks. So yeah, thank you, Shandon, Ethan, Carl, Olaf. Y'all are amazing. And that's a pretty good segue into January Patreon push. Go over to patreon.com/Scaryish podcast. Check out our tiers. There's lots of them, including the shout out tier we just mentioned. The intro tier gets you 2 things. It's $1 a month. 4 quarters, y'all. It gets you 2 things that are very important. 1, early access to episode by about 48 hours. We're posting those on Sundays. The episode releases to the masses on Tuesdays. So if you want to know what we said 48 hours early for $1, you're going to get that. The other thing, which is also pretty awesome, which I didn't mention last week, is no ads. The episode has no ads in it. So ad-free is the way to be. If you go over to patreon.com/Scaryish podcast and you check out the $10 tier called Badge of Honor, that gets you some merch that Robin mails out, I think, every quarter or so. We recently just sent out ornaments for Christmas that has Slender Man on it, which is obviously awesome. And we've sent out lots of good stuff like that over the years, so check that out as well. But patreon.com/Scaryish podcast. Please go there. Please sign up. Please pump up those numbers so that we can get back to where we've been in the past. We're pretty close, and we'd like to see us go back to that top level and then push a little bit further. We do still have goals set. If we get to 150 patrons, we're going to go stay at the Stanley Hotel and record an episode from there. So help make that happen.
I'm currently designing keychains for this next season. I think they are going to be Jersey Devil keychains. I'm very excited. I have a series, if you have never been a patron before, of keychains of cryptids that we've done. And shout out to whoever has every single one so far. But this will hopefully be an addition to that series. So.
Jersey Devil looks pretty freaking cool too. So she's shown me some of the designs as they're in progress, and I'm excited for this one, guys. It's gonna be dope as fuck. But yeah, one last time, January Patreon push. This is when we tell you all of January. Please go sign up over there on patreon.com/Scaryish podcast. We would appreciate it. We love you. Thank you. All right, cool. Enough shilling. Robin, what are you covering this episode?
Shilling?
Like begging.
I am covering a murder that happened in South Africa of a Henri van Breda.
It was of him, or he was the one?
He is the one.
He's the murderer.
He's the one named Sailor Moon.
Okay, cool.
Or, well, yeah.
With this one kind of off the rails a little bit, I'm so confused. So I'm excited to hear about whether or not this guy is a murderer or the murderee or Sailor Moon. So that'll be exciting. I'm going to be covering mercury poisoning. So I'm getting back to that theme of toxicity that I started, I think, end of November, early December. I can't remember exactly which time I covered lead.
It's a new year, so time to cut that toxicity out of your life.
Figured I was going to bring it back in for y'all. We're 13 days in, and I want to make sure you got some toxicity in your life. So we're going to be going over mercury poisoning when it is my turn. But it's not my turn, though. Robin's going to go first, so take it away.
All right, so my topic, like I said, is going to be more of that scary type content because true crime, is scary. It's real. People are probably the scarier things that we cover, not necessarily ghosts or whatnot, but who knows? Maybe ghosts are scarier to you. But the idea that somebody could come out and murder me for absolutely nothing is horrifying. But we're going to go across the Atlantic Ocean because we're located on the west coast of the US. If you guys did not know that, if you're new, and we're going to go to South Africa where a lot of things have happened. A lot of history. South Africa has seen some shit, and so we're going to get into it. In the early hours of January 27th, 2015, a gruesome and bewildering crime shook the tranquil suburb of Stellenbosch, South Africa. The victims, the Van Breda family, which consisted of Martin, the managing director of a real estate investment firm, his wife, Teresa, and their eldest son, Rudy, as well as their daughter, Marley. The family was well known and had actually moved from Australia to South Africa in 2014. Martin actually had a really good paying job, so they lived in a gated housing estate, and it was actually considered to be one of the safest places to live in South Africa. They literally had motion detectors, alarm systems. They even had a 24-hour patrol, like a guard that would walk around or drive around, all through the day. So all of this did nothing to protect them from attack that would happen from within, which is horrifying. The Van Bredas had another son, Henri, who was 20 years old at the time, who was the only perfectly healthy survivor of the incident. So the crime, the incident that happened, Henri, he called emergency services with a story about a masked intruder. And he stated that his family had been attacked by a guy with an axe. And when police arrived, Martin, Teresa, and Rudy were all found dead within the home, and were indeed attacked with an axe. The axe obviously did not get up on its own and attack them. Marley was 16 years old and was in critical condition, having sustained serious head injuries. Henri himself came away with minor lacerations. So he had just about nothing happen to him. Everything that happened to him was non-life threatening.
Do you know where he was cut?
He was stabbed in the torso, and every other injury was not to that extent. So the other people got murdered by an axe, and he just had a stab wound and cuts. According to a paramedic who was at the scene, blood, quote unquote, blood ran like a waterfall down the stairs. That's how he described what he saw when he came on the scene at the house. So it seemed like a pretty brutal murder happened. Police found an axe and a knife at the scene, both having come from the residence. So it's not like someone brought weapons to the home to murder them. There were no signs of forced entry. They found Henri in some sleep shorts and white socks that were absolutely covered in blood. No need to guess whose blood it was. They found everything about Henri suspicious. They found his demeanor on the emergency call to be unconvincing and disingenuous. The forensic investigation that occurred because of this whole thing contradicted what he was claiming to have happened on the call. Henri's injuries were superficial. They seemed self-inflicted. Like, it wasn't that somebody attacked him, he did it to himself. And it seemed like he was purposefully trying to mislead the police. And the call to emergency services was delayed, and all of his statements that he made were inconsistent. He had called his girlfriend at 4:42 in the morning of the murders. He called her multiple times, none of which she answered, which to me is normal. I mean, it's 4:40 in the morning. She's probably sleeping. How could she answer if she's... my phone is on silent. If you're calling me at 4:40 in the morning, I'm not answering it,
Emergencies have to wait until we wake up because we both keep our phones on silent in the night.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Sometimes I have my watch on, though, and if you call me at like 8 in the morning, I'll feel it or something, like vibrate on my watch, and I'll wake up and answer it. I think my sister's called me like that a few times, and I've actually answered, and she's like, "Are you sleeping?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sleeping. What do you want?" You know what I mean? So she didn't answer any of those calls. He then didn't call authorities until 7 a.m. So there's a few hours in between where is he just hanging out with the bodies, you know what I mean? And his reasoning for not calling until 7 was that he collapsed after witnessing his family being attacked and was unconscious for those hours. Which to me doesn't make sense, because if you called your girlfriend, you're fully coherent and you're calling her multiple times and she's just not answering. Do you pass out because she's not answering? I can't tell what trauma, how someone's going to experience a trauma. Maybe he did pass out afterwards. I can't say. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how any of this stuff works. But it just seems a little suspicious.
It seems like total bullshit if you say that you passed out, but like you were able to make multiple phone calls before you passed out. None of those were to the police. And then after those phone calls weren't answered, that's when you lost your will to stay awake. It's just, it just seems like nonsense. Also, like, he didn't mention the fact that he made these calls, right? They just discovered this after the fact?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
From what I can tell on the internet, I can't tell if it's because he didn't disclose that or what. Authorities found that the attacks on the family were quick and that the assailant was determined to kill. So how he was practically unharmed is really sketchy, because if this person was going through the house just brutally murdering these people, and then this person is like not injured, it's very strange. Plus, they were attacked with an axe and then he gets stabbed with a knife. Doesn't make any sense. His sister, actually, okay, so from what they could tell, the dad had injuries to his back, so they thought the dad was like protecting his wife and thought that he wouldn't hit him with this axe. He did. And then his youngest sister had the most defensive wounds out of everybody. So everyone thinks that the younger sister saw him coming, but it's just really just a horrible situation.
It's a horrific thing to even speculate on. Like, maybe she curled up into a ball, like hoping he wouldn't hurt her.
Yeah. Apparently South Africa has a really high crime rate, and I was looking it up, and it has a reputation for consistently having one of the highest murder rates in the world, and more crime rate, or more organized crime relative to other countries. And when I said that South Africa has seen a lot, like, it really has seen a lot throughout history. And there is a problem with wealth disparity and poverty. So that is something that probably has something to do with the fact that there's so much crime there. So when he was first telling these people, like, this guy broke in and started murdering everyone, it was believable at first, with these statistics of having high crime rates and murder rates. People at first believed what Henri was saying, but then things as they were investigating just didn't click. And they were like, this doesn't make any sense. His statements don't make sense. And so he became their number one suspect. And you could say the call was coming from inside the house. He definitely was who they were looking into as the murderer. So after months of surgery and medical treatment, Marley, the younger sister, did survive. She returned to school, but was kept apart from her brother. So they both were sent to live with separate family members. She was later diagnosed with retrograde amnesia, which I believe means you don't remember anything prior to a traumatic incident.
I was going to say, didn't anyone ask her when she woke up who it was that attacked the whole family? And she has retrograde amnesia?
Yeah, so because she had head trauma,
That's nuts. That's like a movie.
So she has no recollection of what happened the night of the attack. It actually took her 6 months before she was able to bring herself to see her brother for the first time after the incident.
It seems like she remembers, but she just doesn't want to tell anyone. Yeah.
It's just, imagine having your own family member attack you like that and you see them murder the entire family and the injuries that she sustained. Like, I can't even imagine getting hit with an axe at all, It's just so scary. Henri pled not guilty. Came out that he had a drug addiction. Then it turned into like, okay, what's the motive here? Was he not getting enough allowance to pay for the addiction? Some people thought, like, because he had that drug addiction, the family was like, we're cutting you off and we're not giving you any more money. And so he murdered them all. That's what they think happened.
I was going to say, like, complaining that your allowance isn't high enough so that you can afford your drugs is the most like first world rich guy.
But that's what they're just
problem.
assuming. They don't know that's what happened. It's just like they're assuming that's what happened. Cops went so far as to track down his drug dealer, who did state that he was a regular customer. Henri had already spent time in a drug rehab center. So this whole thing was a known issue. So this guy's a young man. He's drug addicted. Maybe he didn't want to kill his sister, and so he like hurt her but let her live type thing. Or, you know, because she had the most offensive wounds, maybe he thought she was dead, but you know, he didn't know. You never really know what the motivation is exactly. He never says, you know, because he's like not guilty the whole time. So he never says, you know, I did it because of this, because
I mean, he's pleading not guilty the whole time.
He's pleading not guilty.
That he wasn't the person that did it.
Yeah, he's pleading not guilty the whole time. So he's not going to say like, I did it because of this. That would be, you know, admitting that you did it. So we don't know the actual motivation. A year and a half of investigating go by. Police call up Henri's lawyer and tell them they're going to arrest him for the crime. And so then he goes and turns himself in on June 13th, 2016. So this is the next year. He faces 3 charges of murder for his mother, father, and his brother, and 1 attempted murder because his sister did survive. He was let out on bail, and his court case was supposed to be in September. It gets postponed till November of 2016. On September 6th, 2016, he and his girlfriend, Danielle Van Rensburg, are arrested for possession of narcotics. So he's out on bail and then gets arrested again. Then they're let out on bail again. I think their court case, or his court case, gets pushed back for a number of things. So the trial finally begins April 4th, 2017, where again, he pleads not guilty because you obviously don't want to admit to murder.
I mean, you can cut a deal usually to get the charges like brought down so that you could plead guilty and avoid the whole trial thing and wasting everyone's time. But I think in this person's case, they didn't give a shit. They just wanted to keep bashing their way through this awful situation with more lies.
His testimony described the events as an axe-wielding man wearing dark clothes, gloves, and a balaclava-type mask. He claims to have wrestled the intruder, who then stabbed him in the torso with a knife. During the trial, his uncle testifies, saying that the family would have had no enemies, that they were loved and were loving and a close-knit family. So this happening is just out of, what is the phrase, left field?
That is the phrase, yeah.
So this just didn't make any sense. Henri was always described as being the black sheep of the family. He was a drug addict. He dropped out of school. His other siblings, you know, are like perfect in comparison to him. So it's like a lot of pressure on this one kid who's just different.
So you definitely want to do drugs and commit murder then to win over the family.
I just think that there's a lot more to it than he's just wanting to kill people, you know?
I mean, usually when it's like you're murdering your family, it's straight up out of a vendetta. And it's a lot of stuff that's built up over a very long course of time.
Yeah.
Where you just finally snap. But like going after your younger sister, like that to me seems like something only a monster would do.
I mean, I don't know. We've done Amityville Horror, right? Maybe it was demons.
You never know. It's like, what could have been the personal thing that he went at? Like, did she eat his fucking Cheerios? Like, what could a little sister even do at that point that would upset him so much that he had to involve her in his fucking murder list? So.
I don't know. You never know. Maybe it's something where he didn't think that he was going to. He didn't mean to.
Or maybe he just knew she was going to tell someone, so he attacked her.
Yeah. Security experts at the trial stated that not even Houdini could have broken into their home. So
that's a bit much.
I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of security measures, safety measures, things that people can't normally break into. The alarms didn't go off. There were no signs of anybody breaking in, you know. A neighbor that lived down the street claimed to have heard loud arguing late in the night before of the murders. And Henri said that it was just them watching a really loud movie.
Yeah, sure it was.
So it's just so suspicious. The verdict was delivered on May 21st, 2018. He was found guilty for 3 counts of murder, 1 of attempted murder, and 1 of defeating the ends of justice, which is South African for saying obstruction of justice.
Lying, yeah.
Yeah. So, he was taken into custody and, sent to jail. But apparently, following all the murders, he had to go under treatment for epilepsy and depression.
Epilepsy, huh? That's bizarre.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how much of it is true. I'm not his doctor. I can't report on any of that. But who knows? Maybe he did suffer from those things. On June 7th, 2018, he was sentenced to 3 life sentences in prison, as well as 15 years for the attempted murder of his sister and 12 months for the obstruction of justice charge. So he'll be in jail for a long time, or in prison for a long time. He appealed in November of 2018, but that was dismissed. In 2022, so I was going to say last year. It's not last year. 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
He asked to be moved jails to be closer to his grandmother and his family. He had actually been attacked.
He's like, I missed one. Can you put me closer just in case I break out?
He had been attacked by a gang member in prison and was moved closer to his family. So it did get approved. He did get moved. His skull had actually been split open with a padlock by one of these gang members. Christ. So, okay, but the kicker is this prison he wanted to get moved to, it is one of South Africa's most dangerous prisons. It just happens to be closer to family.
Really just wants
I don't
to
know.
Be closer to the one person he probably has left in his life.
Maybe that actually talks to him or something. I assume his little
sister, hasn't gone to see him. Nor I can't imagine like working through the forgiveness where you would want to go see the person who almost murdered you and did murder the rest of your family.
Yeah, what is it called when you kill your whole family? Like, is it familicide? Familicide? Or I don't know. I don't know what it's called. What is it called?
Filicide? I think filicide specifically is relating to children, but I don't know.
I don't know. There's a word for it, but he almost did that. Didn't get away with it.
Kinslayer. In like fantasy books, that's what they call them.
Okay. So why he did all these things is still a mystery. Did he do it because he was on drugs? Did he do it for drugs? Did he do it to inherit like the multi-million-dollar estate from his father, Did he hate his family? This really isn't that long ago. This is pretty recent.
Yeah, it is.
Right? 2015, oh God, is almost 10 years ago, but still, that's pretty recent.
Fuck. Oh, man. That hurt.
Once I did the math in my head, I was like, no. Oh, my God. But maybe years down the line, there will be a documentary or something that'll enlighten us. Like many of these documentaries do post-mortem, right? A lot of these older cases, they get these documentaries, new evidence comes out, or the people that are in jail finally speak up or they say something. There could always be more to discover, and maybe we'll find out in the years to come, but who knows?
In this guy's case, it's really going to come down to whether or not he tells people. Because, you could get more evidence, or it's mostly going to come from wild speculation. So, for me, it doesn't seem like he did it to get drugs. It seems like he did it out of, rage. Or maybe he was trying to get money by inheriting things.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I guess my sister's not going to get that much, so I guess I can stop hitting her with this axe now. And then, I don't know. For me, if this was a movie, which it sounds so much like a fucking movie, it would be he kills everyone else, he sees the sister, he attacks her, he tells her, I'm not going to kill you, but you can't fucking tell anyone. So when she, comes to, she's like, I don't remember, because she hears he's still alive.
Yeah.
So that might be the case, and he just was terrible with his fucking lie because I think it's just born out of fucking rage. It was a crime of passion. So he didn't have anything premeditated. Because if he did, I can't imagine this was his best plan to murder his family and get away with it.
Yeah.
Was I'll use an axe and there will be no signs of forced entry. And then I'll say someone broke in and used a completely different weapon on me that was in no way life threatening while everyone else got super fucked up or killed.
Yeah.
So either way, what a piece of shit.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff, Robin. First true crime topic of 2024.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed it. All right, cool. Well, before we get to my topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And we are back. So this week, I wanted to finally get back to the theme I started last year, which was toxicity. I'm not sure how many more things in the toxicity well I can really pull from that are interesting. But, there's some stuff out there. No, I know hearing the word toxicity sets some expectations for you folks, and I'm not going to play System of a Down, nor will I call the theme toxic so I can play Britney Spears.
That'd be so good, though.
Just not into either. I mean, I've listened to both of those songs. I don't hate them. I'm just not going to fucking put them in right now. And yes,
You gotta at least put like just a little clip of
I'm not putting any stingers in. It's not happening. There might be some folks who are shocked that I went back to this well when there was just a recent development where like NASA has discovered this weird galactic ring formation found in deep space that absolutely should not exist in any way, shape, or form. I'll probably try and touch on that next episode when I'm able to research that a bit more. It is always cool to hear that something has been spotted in deep space that has no natural place in the known universe. But sometimes you just got to go back to toxicity. Last time on this theme, I covered lead and how fucked humanity was during the 20th century because of how much of it we dumped on ourselves because we're idiots. And we lied about it to each other so we can make money because money is the only thing that matters, even though it's a total social construct and it makes no sense to murder each other for it. Anyways, that's like the basic toxicity in the first fucking place. Quick follow-up, though. I talked to someone about this. I think it might have been my boss, actually. And he told me he had heard about it. He had watched this really long documentary about lead and all the different ways that it like had massive effects on people in the 1900s, specifically 1950s to like 1990s, before they took the lead out of gas. And the two things that they say most often that they think it was most responsible for, one I told you guys, which is lowered IQs, because people got fucking dumb. Which is obvious by all the idiots walking around nowadays. And the second is they sincerely believe, because lead poisoning has such a dramatic effect on brain chemistry and the way people behave, they think that it led to the rise in serial killers. And it's the reason why people who have undergone trauma have a completely different reaction to it than they had for so long in the past, where yes, you would be fucked up by that trauma that affected you so deeply, but if there was some sort of poisoning in your brain chemistry, it had a different effect where if those things happened to you, it sort of broke you in a different way where you turned those things outward rather than inward.
Interesting.
Which I did think was fascinating and fucking horrifying, but I wanted to make sure to follow up and let you guys know that because who knows, maybe it's true. But that said, let's move forward with our lives and learn about the horrors of mercury poisoning. So I got to say this, though, up front before I get into anything else. As a kid, I obviously didn't know a ton about mercury. I don't think there's a lot of children out there who be like, let me tell you about the element mercury. I think the first time I heard about mercury was after watching a movie called Terminator 2.
These facts are going to be fun.
So since it was used in that movie, I saw it. I remember being like, what was the T-1000 made out of? Because there's a scene near the end where he gets frozen by liquid nitrogen and he gets shot by Arnold, who's playing the T-800, known as Arnold. I can't remember. And before he shoots him
as the Terminator.
Before he shoots him, he says, "Hasta la vista, baby." And he shoots him and he shatters, but he's liquid metal. So when he shatters, they're in this fucking factory, right? And the factory's like super hot. And so these frozen chunks of this liquid metal start to melt. And that scene to me, it looked really real. And I did some research on it and it's absolutely real. They did it in a couple of different ways. But when it eventually returns to its liquid form, it starts moving and pooling together. And I was like, how the fuck did they do that? Keep in mind, this movie came out in 1991. So I was only 6 years old when I saw it. Came out July 3rd, 1991. Best 4th of July for fucking anyone who likes movies. Because Terminator 2 is one of the greatest movies of all time.
Okay.
So I brought it up to my brother. I was like, how did they do that? Because I know you have to like make a movie. And he told me that stuff was mercury that was on the ground, which is true. It was. When you see that liquid scene, that is mercury. And he told me that even though it was a liquid, it could still get moved around by a magnet because even in its liquid form, it could still be magnetized. So I thought, wow, this shit is crazy. So here's some fun facts about me at that point. Like I mentioned, I'm 6 years old. I had heard of mercury at 6 years old.
The stuff in the thermometers?
The planet.
Oh.
Because I had just learned my very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas. Pizzas being Pluto, which gets taken off and put on every now and then. I don't know what the fuck your anagram or whatever it's called is.
What did
if you don't have pizza.
What did you call it?
My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. That's how I remembered them.
Where does 9 come from?
What do you mean 9?
You said 9 pizzas.
Neptune.
Oh, okay.
Holy shit.
Oh,
Anyways,
How many planets are there?
9. There was. Now there's 8.
So 9 makes sense. Okay.
God damn. Okay, cool. It could be nasty pieces. Okay. Who gives a fuck?
I never learned that. Okay, growing up, I never learned.
This is the whole never eat soggy Wheaties thing all over again. Sour watermelon, soggy waffles, soggy Wheaties.
It's
those
soggy
are the 3.
waffle. Never eat soggy waffle.
I'm just like, whatever. We're so different in so many ways. It's crazy. So I'm going to get back to this. I'm trying to admit to you how stupid I was when I was 6. And Robin's just jumping in here like, hey, I'm stupid when I'm in my 30s. So anyways, I had heard of Mercury. I thought it was a planet. So when I learned this thing about liquid metal and that actually being Mercury, I thought 3 specific things in my head. Okay. 1, Mercury, the planet, was comprised entirely of this liquid metal. So that planet closest to the sun makes sense that it's liquid metal, so close to the fucking sun, right? There's no way that Mercury could be in its metal form. That giant planet has to be a ball of fucking liquid metal.
That was your logic.
That was my logic at 6 years old. 2, Mercury being on Earth, an element on Earth, must be incredibly rare because it had to have come from Mercury, the planet, somehow. So who knows how it got here, but it's got to be super rare. And then 3, the robots in Terminator were obviously from another planet. Like, duh. They never show you where they're from, so I just assume, oh, he's made of fucking, Mercury. He's got to be from Mercury.
They don't ever show you where the Terminators are from?
They give you, like, a few flash forwards where you see the future in the first one, and significantly less flash forwards in the second one.
There's that one Terminator movie with the really hot chick.
Terminator 2, and you're talking about Sarah Connor. Right? You're talking about Linda Hamilton
3 or 4?
Doing fucking chin-ups on her bed that's pushed up against the wall.
Oh my God, no.
That scene was like, holy shit, she would murder me.
No, that's a more recent one.
I stopped watching them after Salvation. So
okay.
Terminator 3 is the one where there's like the robot, the Terminator that can talk to people. I think that's the one you're talking about, which is not a very good movie. It's very campy. It's not the Terminator vibe because James Cameron had nothing to do with it, but it has a pretty good ending. And then Salvation goes back to like the darker tone, but it's just kind of a fucking mess.
There's one that ends with the helicopter in the warehouse or something, and it's like a battle with the Terminators, and it's just a lot of killing and murder, and everything's on fire.
I don't recall a helicopter in a warehouse, so this has to be one of the ones I haven't seen.
Okay.
So, okay, cool. I'm glad you guys joined us for the Terminator podcast, because I could literally talk about Terminator 1 and 2 forever. It is such a No, okay. So, based on those 3 things, I feel like I'm a fairly educated 6-year-old, right? Obviously, I'm fucking stupid. But what's important is that because of those 3 assumptions combined, I assumed immediately, without knowing anything else about Mercury, that it was toxic as fuck. Obviously, it's not good for a human being. It's a fucking robot. So... like, I was already wary of Mercury at a very young age. It was at the very least dangerous. So I was wrong about literally all 3 of those things. The Terminators were not obviously from Mercury. They were from the future. Mercury, while it is rare, is not shards of the planet Mercury that someone made their way here. And the planet Mercury is not a giant orb of liquid metal. I think. I'm still not 100% on that one. Like, I swear to Christ, every now and then when I think of it, I'm like, is it though? Like, is it all
no?
liquid?
It's no.
I remember when they landed on Venus, I'm like, how the fuck did they land on Venus? Venus is gas. Because in my child brain, like, the planets went liquid planet, gas planet, our planet.
What?
And I was so fucking wrong about all that growing up. Anyways, so obviously 6-year-old me is pretty fucking stupid. Luckily, you guys are getting this story told to you by 38-year-old me. But I want to talk now about how toxic mercury is and what it does to you. And then we're going to talk about instances where mercury poisoning has happened in a pretty outrageous or well-known fashion. And lastly, we'll talk about how it's going to fucking get you because it's still around. Not really. I don't want to control you through fear. Like make
don't
you scared.
Break open your old thermometers.
Yeah, that's always a good rule. So
mercury is magnetic?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I haven't fact-checked that in a long time, but I'm pretty sure it's still able to be moved around with a magnet if it's in liquid form. So I'm sure someone's going to be like, actually, Adam, DM me privately. Don't post that bullshit on our fucking... Actually, I don't give a shit. You can post it wherever you want. I actually do want to know this. Okay, cool. So let's go in this. I don't want to do like a one-to-one comparison to lead because I don't think that it's really a fun time to compare something to a topic that we just had.
It's like tomato anyway.
And they are very different, but I'll try and use a couple of things to start out to help convey the information. So mercury, when it is introduced to a human body, acts as a neurotoxin. So does lead. So they're similar in that way. Okay, Robin has a question. She raised her hand in case you couldn't hear it.
Do you talk about fish at any point during your
I
segment?
obviously have to talk about fish.
Okay.
So that's going to happen. But, okay, mercury's a neurotoxin. It affects your brain and nervous system the most in vicious and horrifying ways. There are different ways mercury can get into your system. I don't mean like the sources. I mean the kinds of mercury. There's mercury vapor, which I haven't even fucking mentioned. So gas mercury, basically, which obviously enters your system when you breathe it in, which is horrible for you. There's two other types that are called organic methyl mercury and inorganic mercury. All that to say, inorganic mercury is the ore. It's the actual metal. Organic methyl mercury, which I'm only going to refer to as methyl mercury moving forward, is the most common form that people are familiar with. That's the form that's in fish. It basically happens where the metal combines with carbon, and because of that, the way it absorbs into your body makes it stay. So it's not like a foreign object or some sort of poison that your body's like trying to eep out. It just sort of sits in you and poisons you and slowly kills you.
So why is it it's such a high content in fish?
So I will get to that. So hold your horses.
Okay.
So those are the three ways that you can get it. Okay. Once you've been exposed to it, you're really, really, really not going to have a good time. So symptoms of mercury poisoning are not a fucking joke. They start at sensory impairment, blurred vision, like spots in your vision, difficulty hearing, slurred speech, sometimes just straight up impaired speech where you can't talk, coordination problems. You can't walk. You have a really tough time finding your equilibrium. Up to this point, you might just think, wow, this sounds like being super fucking drunk. That could be kind of fun. And one, it's not going to be fun. But I mean, I get what you're saying when it comes to like, it sounds like being drunk. Like drinking is literally just a willful,
poisoning
slow,
of yourself.
Measured poisoning of yourself to get to the desired level of side effect and hope your liver doesn't wither up and die if you do it too often. Or if you just go too far one night and you have alcohol poisoning and you fucking die. Maybe I should cover alcohol poisoning next time and the crazy shit people did before they died. That could be fun in a horrible way. Which is kind of like, the Scaryish way. But
what the frick?
Those symptoms are just the start, all right? So in addition to those, muscle weakness, feeling weak all the time, numbness in your limbs and extremities and other portions of your body, general confusion, tremors, just violently shaking, the inability to form coherent thoughts where you just can't think straight anymore, intellectual disabilities, paralysis, eventually coma, and then, of course, death. Oh, and if you inhaled it in its vapor form, it also does severe damage to your lungs and kidneys, which can include bleeding internally, which would just be a really, really horrible fucking way to die. I mean, I talk about, like, drowning as being one of my biggest fears. I can't imagine drowning in my own blood. Like, that's one of the most horrific things I could ever imagine.
I only want to drown in other people's blood.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard anyone say. So, unlike lead, where there wasn't like a solid moment where someone sat down and discovered like, this is toxic as fuck, mercury was kind of just started to be understood by the human race like, oh, this stuff isn't good for us. Like in general, like as a whole, like no specific person is like the guy who told everyone like mercury's bad. Like people figured that out at a very early time. Like mercury's been used in a lot of stuff by humans for a fucking while, guys. Like Chinese, Greek, Roman, and Egyptian civilizations from thousands of years ago. Yep, makeup. They used mercury for a variety of different things, including makeup, like Robin just said. Even though records from that time are limited, it appears individuals that would use mercury, where it's usually cosmetics or medicine, they were almost always aware it wasn't fucking good for you. Like they knew it. They had side effects from just working with it, but they thought like, well, in the right doses, it should probably be fine, which is fair. Lots of medicine, like in the right dose, can have a positive effect on you, Mm-hmm. Like if I have a headache and I take Excedrin migraine, cool, my headache goes away. If I have a headache and I take a bottle of Excedrin migraine, Adam goes away.
Well, it's something where, like when people take Oxy and stuff like that, it's supposed to be prescribed for a very specific thing, and then you take too much of it, and then it becomes a problem.
I don't think I've ever taken Oxy. I'm a very anti-drug guy in general, like even to the point where I'm stubborn. Like when I got my wisdom teeth out and they gave me painkillers,
I did not use it.
I was like, nah, I'm good. Like not because I'm worried I'm going to form a habit or get addicted, because I'm just like, it's not that bad. Like I'll get through it.
I never used my medication for my teeth, and then one day the whole bottle was empty. It was very sketch. Don't know what happened.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
When was that?
When we were living in Vegas still.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where were we living?
At the apartment.
Oh, wow. This I don't remember this happening at all.
I was like, that's interesting.
That's fucking weird. That's super sketch. We have some examining. We have a mystery of our own to go through, some true crime. But anyways, let's get back to this. So folks a long time ago used to use this shit, all different kinds of civilizations all over the globe. And they all knew it probably wasn't good for you. All right. They still use it in medicine, which to me is one of the craziest things. Cause like knowing it could cause all these things, they're like, yeah, I'm sure maybe a little bit will be fine. It's just like, it's creepy to me. Middle Ages though, that's where the mercury poisoning had its first effect on human beings that I'm familiar with. And I think most people's familiarity when they hear mercury poisoning outside of fish comes from this particular story. I don't think you realize this. I'm pretty sure I told you this on Scaryish like a year ago, and you're like, get the fuck out of here. But back in the day, there used to be a job, okay, called a hatter. And a hatter, in addition to helping you pick a hat, would make them too. And they'd use animal fur, which typically wasn't the type of like texture and feel that you'd want to put on your head. So they'd have to prepare it. A lot of different ways they prepared it was to apply different things to it, one of which was a solution called mercuric nitrate, which would roughen the fibers and made it kind of more matted, which was easier to shape into felt. And everyone knows what felt is. It's very soft. That's what you want to feel. So they were transforming these pelts basically into felt by putting this mercuric nitrate on it. That's not a great thing because they were doing it so often. They were working with mercury a fuck ton. And if you didn't need to know that mercury is not good for something, you would take this hide of an animal that used to be alive and you would apply this solution to it. And this process is called carroting. And you might think, why the fuck is it called carroting? You're just pouring something onto it. The reason it's called carroting is because everything that you pour it onto turns orange.
Oh.
So they're just like, I guess we'll just call it carroting. What an interesting name. But you're handling mercury in liquid form, and there's also vapors from it. So you also have the mercury vapors. And, you know, no matter how good of a hatter you are, you're having this slow but steady exposure to it. And they started to suffer side effects, including and especially confusion, inability to form coherent thoughts, and intellectual disabilities, which seemed to make them pretty fucking crazy. Like if you were a hatter, you had a reputation for being off. And the older you were more off, which is where the phrase mad as a hatter comes from. Because they were literally using stuff that made themselves go fucking crazy. Not just that, but hatters would eventually be unable to work due to their severe tremors. They couldn't hold still. Seizures and severe tremors were often called back in the day hatter's shakes. So if you had a shake to you, they'd say it was a hatter's shake. And before, it just meant anyone who had a shake. Now it literally means tremors due to mercury exposure. So if you've had significant mercury exposure and you start having tremors, someone might tell you like, oh, you have hatter shakes. Like that's a symptom of mercury poisoning.
Interesting.
So before it meant it just generally, now it is very specific to like, oh, that's mercury. Like that's bad for you. People really understood mercury would fuck you up. Enough so that when the Industrial Revolution happened, they understood like if you're working with mercury, if there's some sort of byproduct that has mercury in it, we should probably pay attention to what exposures are being allowed. I say that, but during the Industrial Revolution, they kind of thought that because they didn't want to just have workforce like reductions constantly and having to constantly replace people. They didn't really provide protection because they didn't give a fuck if the workers were getting exposed and suffering complications. They basically just didn't want anyone to die. Because back in the day, it's not like they were going to get sued, but they were aware of it. The big issue in history that took place fairly recently, as far as the scale of like the timelines we've already covered, took place in 1956. And it led to a much better understanding of how problematic mercury is in ways that lead isn't, and that we never knew up until that point. In 1956, there was this company called the Chiso Corporation, and they had a chemical factory out of Minamata, Japan. I think that's how you say that. At this chemical factory, they made shit like plastics, drugs, perfumes, and cosmetics using a chemical called acetaldehyde, which they brewed there for use in creating those other products. They weren't just using it, they were making it and using it on this other shit. Acetaldehyde is made using mercury. That factory had actually been there since 1932, but 1956 is the year we're talking about because that is the year the Chiso Corporation decided to release its industrial wastewater, or the literal liquid runoff from everything happening in that factory, into Minamata Bay. This is in Japan. I don't know if I mentioned that. Now, I say this is the year they did it because that's what it says on the court documents. Realistically, they could have been doing it the whole time. It had just been discovered in 1956, but they had been doing that since they started in the factory at 1932. And the reason they found it is because the local population was very, very fucking sick. They had been for most of the 1950s. There's this mysterious disease there that they couldn't figure out, and no one knew why. And the symptoms for those folks included numbness of the hands and feet, general muscle weakness, narrowing field of vision, difficulty speaking, difficulty hearing. Some folks were being taken to the hospital because they were so severely sick where they'd fall into comas. Some would wake up and some would pass away. And some were taken to psych wards because they were losing their shit and just not acting like themselves, and they just weren't recovering at all. Some, I don't think they're called psych wards too. I read something about psych wards in Japan in the 1950s and how fucking crazy it was. Some were in wheelchairs because they were just straight up paralyzed from the waist down, in some cases the neck down. And not just the people, but like the cats, the birds, the fish, they all had bizarre symptoms as well. The locals called what was happening around them cat dancing disease, because the local wild cats were prone to displays of quote-unquote dancing.
Wow.
Which was just them suffering from severe tremors.
That's
because they're small
so sad.
And they had such high exposure. Scientists were like, we have to figure out what's happening here.
The fact that any living being in this vicinity, humans, animals, were messed up from this is crazy.
Yeah, all straight up affected by it. And the scientists in the area were like, let's study these creatures that are also having these weird side effects to see if we can figure out what's going on. So they started studying the birds, the cats, and the fish because they wanted to know what was going on. When they did that, they found that they all had extremely elevated levels of mercury, but they noted that fish in particular were the most affected, and it was frightening levels of mercury in the fish. They're like, what the fuck is happening? So once they did that, they realized like, well, the cats and the birds, they use, fish as a food source.
Yeah.
And it kind of hit them at the same time, like, so do the people of this fucking region, because obviously Japan eats a lot of sushi. Minamata is a city right on the ocean, right on the bay. And they were just like flabbergasted at what they discovered. So they started testing all these folks that were having problems from it. Sure enough, they all had massive levels of mercury in their system. And they're like, this is 100% what's causing this. Where is it coming from? So they started investigating where it could be coming from. And that's when they found out that Chisa Corporation was just fucking straight up dumping wastewater into the fucking bay. That's how they're getting rid of it. They're like, bad water mixes with a bunch of good water. I'm sure everything will be fine.
Happens all over the world.
It's crazy that people did this. They're just like, I'm sure there's enough good water to cancel out this horrible stuff we're going to pour into it. So everyone was horrified when they learned this. The Chisa Corporation is eventually held responsible. They wound up having to pay monthly allowances to the people, hopefully high enough where they could get their drugs so they don't kill their families with axes. They had to pay their medical expenses. And eventually the Chisa Corporation got sued super hard, and they had to make a massive one-time payment to everyone involved as like a settlement. But it apparently took really fucking long for this to happen. The first lawsuit wasn't brought against them officially until 1968. 13 years after they found out this shit was happening.
Wow.
Or 12 years, excuse me, which is just fucking baffling. Like, lots of folks believe they continued dumping in the bay for an additional 12 to 13 years during the time the trial started, in fact, if not such an extreme amounts where they get caught, or just under extreme secrecy where they were driving it to different places but still dumping it in the bay. It is worth noting, too, that this same shit happened in Niigata, Japan, which is 800 miles to the north. 12 years later? No, 10 years later, 1965.
Company? Different company.
Completely different company. Same business practices, though. So it was known across the industries, like, if you have industrial wastewater, just dump it into the fucking water. Everything will be fine. And these motherfuckers were still doing this 10 years after they found out, like, this is killing people and poisoning our food supply. And they just fucking kept doing it. When they got caught, that's when it got serious. And then a couple years later is when the Chisa Corporation finally had charges brought against them, because their violation was just much more severe and larger in scope and scale. So it is baffling to me how people just straight up poison everyone else, including themselves, because they lived in this region and they ate the fucking fish too. One of the most horrifying things we really began to understand as a result of this was how mercury, when it combines with carbon, like I mentioned, and becomes methylmercury, makes its way through a food chain. There's this thing where if you have something in your system, you just sort of store it. That's called bioaccumulation. And it's what it sounds like. Bio, living thing, accumulation, accumulating something, right? And it's just something that like an organic creature does if they're exposed to something. Biomagnification is different. Biomagnification is something lead supposedly does not do. Biomagnification means the higher up the food chain you go, the worse the mercury exposure was. because even at the base level, things are exposed, but everything eats everything else. So because of that, the things higher up on the food chain have the same level of exposure just from like whatever is around them.
Yeah.
But they're also eating significantly more higher concentrated things because they're eating the things lower than them on the food chain. So the higher up you go on the food chain, the worse the mercury exposure is, like significantly. And when they realize that, they're like, this could have an exponential and catastrophic effect on the entire food chain based off the fact that we all eat things. And if mercury poisoning gets into things, all the things that we eat, we could be fucked as a society in general. Right. Like, this is just something, this is like an end game thing where if we put too much of this into our systems, we're just straight up fucked. And it really freaked people out when they realized that biomagnification basically meant that there are things that if you eat, you're almost guaranteed to get mercury poisoning. And there's really no way they can get rid of it at this point unless all those things just straight up fucking die off through mass extinction. So this is true of aquatic life. It's why a high consumption of fish can lead to mercury poisoning in humans, even those consuming fish nowhere near high concentrations of pollutants, or if we haven't had some sort of an environmental disaster anytime lately, because it's basically spread through most marine life that exists in the world today, which is fucking horrifying to think about.
So what do you do if you're a pescatarian?
If you're a pescatarian, you got to mix in a lot of other shit because you will get mercury poisoning, or eat fish that have very low concentrations, because there are certain fish that have very low concentrations of mercury. I have a list later, so I will let you guys know. So as a tribute to folks that had to go through this for us to learn it, mercury poisoning in general, but especially by consumption of fish, is lovingly referred to now as Minamata disease. So if you get mercury poisoning from eating fish, you have Minamata disease because you're just like those poor fuckers in 1956 who were all getting super sick and in some cases dying because they were eating fish that they didn't know at the time was poison. So where can you get mercury poisoning from? Let's talk about the vapor form first, all right? You can get mercury poisoning or exposure in vapor form from like industrial shit, especially processing, which isn't shocking. A lot of things are still used in some cases that have mercury or just straight up are mercury. One of the things I didn't know that you can get it from is gold mining. Like, you think gold mining, you think like old-timey prospector with a pan.
Yeah.
Digging up dirt and like using the river water to like sort through it to see if there's any like good nugs of fucking gold. And it's still kind of like that process, except when it pulls up the sediment, it's obviously machines doing it now. And it just fucking straight up dumps liquid mercury into the sediment and it separates. And then the river water washes it downstream, and that's how mercury still gets into fucking food sources, because it's still being fucking used.
So there has to be rules against
that, I'm
right?
sure there are, 100%. But in places where there's not rules or regulations, or in places where they just decide to gut the environmental protection agencies, you can still fucking do it. You can still get away with it. It's legal to buy the shit. It's apparently legal to use it in certain ways still. So if you're not properly regulating the use of this stuff, it will 1000% wind up in the fucking food chain because human beings are idiots. Straight up. Mercury vapor can be found in a surprising number of places besides industrial. Dental filling creation for the longest time was another place where you could get it. Not just having them in your mouth, because a lot of people had mercury fillings in their mouth.
I had metal fillings, like a whole bunch of them when I was a kid.
Back in the day, creating those fillings was like the new Hatter's disease, because it would happen so often where people are starting to have symptoms. They're like, is this fucking mercury poisoning? And they're like, oh, yep, we should probably switch what we're using in fillings at this point because it's probably bad to also have those in your mouth. One that fascinated me is fluorescent lamps and light bulbs, especially when they break. It basically just releases mercury into the air, which is one of the easiest ways to get mercury poisoning through vapor. I had a friend who destroyed 2 fucking fluorescent light bulbs by not paying attention, and it just created this massive cloud of dust. Like right on top of all of us, and it just like rained down and we had to like change our clothes and shit. It's crazy to think like just for a nice hum and a light to shine down on us, we're like everything in that tube is toxic as fuck to us. If it breaks, we could die. Probably not die realistically, but like not have a good time because
that's
you have
horrifying
fucking mercury raining down on you. And I've had that happen to me in my life. Robin already mentioned it, but thermometers, the ones you put under your tongue and the thing like slowly goes up based off of your temperature. Like the thing that's going up, like the shiny thing where you check to see what your temperature is, that's fucking mercury. So don't break it. Also, barometers have mercury in them. Blood pressure gauges have mercury in them. Tons of equipment uses mercury. And if it breaks, mercury straight up is just very fucking hazardous and it's just there. And if you manage to avoid all that, it also occurs in nature. Like geothermal springs and volcanoes are the number 1 and 2 producers of mercury vapor. So don't go to Yosemite and decide to huff the vents or like try and smell how hot the air is that's coming out of a volcano. You could probably die from doing that
No
in general,
way.
but also there's a fuck ton of mercury and a lot of other horrible stuff in there as well. So
Wow.
that's the vapor. What about the most common form, methyl mercury? Can you just like avoid eating sushi and you'll be good to go?
I love
No.
sushi too much. Freaking kill me.
Even if that was the case, like you could still be able to eat some sushi, but it's not. It's not the case at all. Any place that gets contaminated with mercury will yield toxic food sources. So everyone thinks of fish because of the Minamata disaster. But realistically, plants and grains, rice especially, have been known, once the ground was contaminated, to wind up having high levels of mercury that were poisonous to people and that would work their way into the food chain. And because of that, if you have like groundwater or dirt, like soil that is contaminated with mercury, it doesn't just, happen to fish. It happens to all the local wildlife that eats whatever that specific produce is. So it can spread through a bunch of different stuff. It's not as widespread as it is with fish, obviously, but anything like that can cause a contamination. It still can be found in medicine, although usually not in like first world countries. There's a lot of like home remedies and homeopathic cures from third world countries. A lot of the poorer regions across Asia still use this in a lot of different things. In some cases, you can still find it in old cosmetics or in some just like homemade cosmetics where they're like, yeah, I mean, it's what the Egyptians wore type of shit. So I gotta say, all that said, the primary by far way to get mercury poisoning from methyl mercury is from the consumption of fish. I should also alert you folks now that it is a 100% fucking myth that if you cook your fish, you won't get mercury poisoning. I grew up in the Midwest. I heard this shit all the time. Raw fish is bad for you. You can get mercury poisoning. You have to cook your fish. Total fucking horseshit. That does nothing at all to reduce the amount of mercury that's present. Methyl mercury is not a bacteria or a parasite. It doesn't die when you cook it. It's literally an organic material that binds to the proteins in fish muscle. So it just remains intact through cooking because you're still going to eat that. It doesn't disintegrate. It doesn't boil out. It's still present. So if you're one of those folks who doesn't eat raw fish, but will eat it cooked, and the reason is because you say you don't want to get mercury poisoning, you didn't realize this, hopefully, but you're full of shit. So just say you don't like it. Or just go ahead and try raw fish because it doesn't fucking matter. Like straight up. Consuming too much fish will lead to mercury poisoning eventually. Based off of what types of fish you're consuming, it can take longer or it can go pretty quick. And I'm going to give a breakdown of which fish are the absolute worst to eat. So at the top are sharks. I don't know if you're allowed to eat sharks.
I don't think you can.
But for anyone who is offered shark, I want you to consider it is an apex predator. It is the top of the food chain, which is why it has the highest concentration of mercury that exists. They live incredibly long lives, and they have not just general exposure from their environments, which accrues at an alarmingly high rate because of how old they are, but they also eat fucking everything, including and especially the other things that are high up on the food chain that already have high levels of exposure to mercury. Sharks are the absolute worst as far as eating something that has mercury in it. Swordfish are next. King mackerel, tilefish, marlin. Basically big fucking fish that not a lot of things hunt. Big eye and ahi tuna is next on the list. Tuna is my fucking favorite, which breaks my heart. I already knew this, but it still hurts to read. Orange roughy, which I've never had, and Chilean sea bass are also on the list of be very wary for consuming high levels of this fish. Fish with low mercury levels are salmon,
Which is my favorite.
which is your favorite. Trout, which is also very good. Tilapia, which you should probably read up on tilapia because there's a lot of really fucking horrible tilapia out
People
there.
keep talking about imitation crab, and I don't want to look it up because I eat way too much of that in sushi.
I'm not looking it up. Cod, sole, which I don't think I've ever had. Shrimp, oysters, and most shellfish at this point actually are not too bad off when it comes to mercury poisoning.
So everything that I like to eat, for the most part, is Gucci. I'm good.
I cannot dive in the ocean and take bites of sharks anymore. I didn't realize that what was causing my craziness. So now I know. But yeah, I'm very sad about tuna, but that's not a big shocker for me. FYI, if you have mercury poisoning, by the way, you can transfer it to a baby via breastfeeding. It will contract it. Or if it's still living in you, it will absolutely get mercury poisoning, which can lead to horrible side effects, which you can only imagine.
That is so sad.
So obviously, I think this is why they tell you not to eat sushi. There's also some like fishborne illnesses that can get you very sick, which can cause you to throw up a whole lot, which can lead to dehydration and, just being generally very sick. But you should probably not be eating that much fucking sushi to get mercury poisoning when you're pregnant in general. All that said, you can't live your life in fear. Like, I fucking love sushi. I will continue to eat it, but I'll definitely keep in mind it is not something that I can eat literally every day and probably just shouldn't in general. Avoid getting poisoned is the takeaway from this topic. It's bad stuff. This is one of the few horrible things, though, that humanity has at least acknowledged pretty directly as we've figured out it's bad for us and taken steps to prevent it from being too widespread.
Like with any, poisoning, like lead poisoning, the radiation poisoning, all of that stuff, it has taken so long for people to realize it's bad for you. It's just mind-blowing. Like the whole Radium Girls thing. We haven't talked about that topic yet, I don't think.
Maybe I'll cover that one.
But it's just people that run these big companies don't want to admit what they're doing is a bad thing.
And they're usually the first to find out that what they're doing has severe negative side effects. And the reason they don't immediately address it is because of money. It's 1000% because of money. It's not that they're thinking like, I just don't care. No, it's straight up because they care, but they care more about money. And that's just a horrific prospect.
I can't wait for you to cover the Radium Girls one because it's just going to be so fun.
Well, you've actually read that book, so maybe I'll just let you cover that one so I can be educated.
But you're a toxicity boy.
I mean, okay. So they say just about every person has some level of mercury in their body due to it being in the food chain, which is a pretty scary topic, a pretty scary fact to end on.
Yeah.
I would never have imagined I've come into contact with mercury in my life, but knowing how much sushi I've eaten in my life, I guess I can totally understand that. So, yeah. Anyways, that, my spooky friends, is mercury poisoning.
Thank you for that toxic update.
You're welcome. Stay toxic, my friends.
No, don't stay toxic. Cut it out of your life, y'all. 2024, the year of no toxicity.
This is why you don't want toxicity in your life. So, all right, cool. If you have stories that you'd like to send us, we still take those. We will still do story times. They don't have to be about the topics, but if you have like something supernatural, paranormal, true crime, extraterrestrial, maybe just coincidental where something weird happened that scared you, but turns out it wasn't any of those things, and you want to share those with us, or maybe your friend has a story that you'd like to share with us, family member, whatever, email storytime@scaryish.com or go to our website, scaryish.com, click on contact us, fill out that form. It comes directly to us. You can also hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scariyishpodcast. Twitter is @scariyishpod, and Instagram is @scariyishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scariyishpodcast, and those are monthly donations with tiers starting at $1. And at $1, you get those ad-free episodes. So,
ad-free is the way to be.
So we're going to start posting on this new schedule we've created. If you haven't heard what the schedule is, maybe we should post something about the schedule. I don't know. But you can go back to the last episode.
I literally released an announcement letting everyone know on our podcast feed.
Okay.
I told you that too, so you had to sketch that one away.
Yeah.
But Robin eats a lot of sushi, y'all. So.
Yeah, but you can find out what the schedule is, and we're going to try and post consistently on that new schedule. Patrons are going to get that early access. So if you want to do that, you can go there. If you just want to donate, you can go to our one-time donation site, ko-fi.com/scaryish podcast. And those are one-time donations. All your donations, all your sharing with your friends, everything is really helpful. And we love all of you guys for it.
Yeah, letting people know to listen to the show really, really does help us out. And like Robin mentioned, so patrons will get the episodes on Sunday, and then the episodes will release to everyone on Tuesday. So 48 hours of early access, pretty solid. Much better than what we had been doing recently, which was a few hours. So we hope we can stick to this schedule. I mean, 2 weeks in a row, guys. We're fucking killing it. So doing pretty well. But yeah, that's everything for this episode. So Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.